Mitchell. I went to York House from, I think, 1955 to 1961. I was a boarder. I was in the school from grade 6 to 12. I loved it. I have no brothers or sisters, and I wasn't afraid of being left here. I sort of remember looking at my parents when they sort of left me, parked me there, and Mrs. Clark, I think, had her hand on my shoulder going, you know, well, dear, it'll be all right and all that. And it was, and I had a lot of fun. I mean, it was like having an instant family. And when I first went there, I was so pitifully shy. It was awful. It was just different. Sort of real camaraderie, and you know, the classes were small and everybody knew everybody, and we'd go out on the weekends to people's homes, and or my grandparents lived in Vancouver, so I could spend weekends with them. But yeah, it was great. I loved it. Well, I was sent there because my parents knew that they were going to move to Vancouver. And they wanted, my mother always said, you know, I want to send you on ahead, if you will, because you'll make your lifelong friends. And she was right. I have made my lifelong friends. I think I was in the junior dorm, and there were 6 of us. There was a girl from Texas, which I really wish I'd stayed in touch with. She was younger. I wasn't the oldest one necessarily, although pretty close to it. In that room, but there were 3 bunk beds with an adjoining bathroom. Every morning, I have no idea what time we were awoken, or that we had to get up, you know, but we would sort of splash water on our face, and we would go on a morning run, and we would run down 25th, like just a herd of cattle. It was just ridiculous. And then we'd walk back, and rain, shine, winter, it didn't matter. So you'd come in all chuffed up and into our uniforms, went downstairs, the dining room was downstairs in the basement, had breakfast or whatever passed for breakfast, which was usually some hideous globby oatmeal or something. I mean, it was, oh God. Anyway, and then I guess we'd just go to school. We'd walk across and the day would begin, and then at recess they'd give us graham crackers and milk that had been poured probably at about 7 o'clock in the morning. It was just disgusting. So you'd go to sip your milk, and they'd have this big mustache of sort of a film that had settled on the milk, and ugh, terrible. I'm assuming, well, I know we did have some study time, or prep, I think it was called. That was usually, we'd wander over to the senior school at night, and in the classroom just do our homework, etc., and then back, have a bath, and go to bed. And then it would start all over again. Well, we used to have something called a tuck, and yeah, I guess your parents would leave money sort of in a kitty somewhere, and you could go out and buy whatever you wanted with this money, whether it was chocolate bars or heaven only knows what. And Mrs. Clark had a gong, and I think it was on Sunday nights or something when you came back, the gong would go, and that meant you could go and sort of raid your tuck. I mean, it was just all terribly bizarre, and I'm sure there's annals in the encyclopedias about old English boarding schools and what it was like. And it was pretty much like that. The food was just appallingly disgusting. It was just awful. It was terrible. And it was pretty much the same all the time. Obviously done on a budget. Like, there would always be fish on Fridays. And one of the rice pudding was just glutinous and disgusting. And you'd sit at these long tables, and personally I would sort of put it in my mouth because there was always a monitor in the form of a teacher or somebody, and I just sort of pretend and cough and put it in, and it was just revolting. Tongue, beef tongue or so, it was just terrible. Not really disguised in anything saucy or flavorful. I could never gag that down. Yeah, for the most part, it was probably a lot of carbs and a lot of really cheap, awful meats and stuff. It was grim. And fortunately, there were a couple of large garbage cans on the way out, and we must have been asked to clear because you'd have your paper napkins or something, and napkin full of rice pudding or whatever else you weren't wanting to eat that day. But yeah, it was pretty bad. So you'd go home on the weekend or go wherever you were going on a weekend for a real meal, which was terrific. We also always had to go to church on Sunday. So we were marched over to St. John's. And, yeah, but yeah, the school in its early stages was very, I think, close to the Anglican Church, which would have reflected Mrs. Clark. I think it was fabulous. And if anybody has a chance to experience it anywhere, I hope it would be as good. I loved it. I just loved it. And I did, it was, God, my mother and me just, I'd have to give it to her that, you know, I don't see a lot of people from my class on a regular basis. We're in touch. But when we do, it's like nothing. It's like there hasn't been 50 years. Crazy.